Okay, so welcome back from break. We are headed into chapter 18, the fall of Babylon. Now, where we left off just a minute ago was that we decided, based on what we had read, that Babylon is a city and that she's identified as a whore, a harlot, right? That she's the city that in essence is sitting on top of the beast, and we can't say that she's controlling the beast because we don't have anything in Scripture that suggests that she's actually controlling the beast. But we know that the beast does not want her sitting on top because it says that 10 horns end up ultimately agreeing together to give their power to the beast. In other words, the horns on the head of the beast and the beast itself are in unity with each other, and they get the whore off with the intent of burning her with fire and destroying her, right? So, we pick up in chapter 18, verse 1. And after these things I saw another angel come down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was lightened with his glory. And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the great is fallen, and has become the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird. Just as a side note, that right there, that section, hang on, so I can do this without falling off here. Let me see if I have it on here. I don't. There's prophecy about this. I didn't bring my card. There's prophecy about this in the Old Testament. I'm fascinated by how much prophecy exists in the Old Testament about the whore of Babylon. It's really, really interesting. Like what we just read here about her being, it says she's become a habitation of devils, the hold of every foul spirit, and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird, was prophesied hundreds of years before this prophecy. It was prophesied hundreds of years before this. The same thing was prophesied. So we know that the Lord has not only seen this city in his line of sight, but that God, for now millennia, has been waiting for the time that's appropriate to punish it. For all nations, and I don't know that necessarily means that the city is that old. I think it just means that God knows that the city is, right? For all the nations have drunk, verse 3, of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth, there's a new one, now we're adding merchants, the merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. So, this city is dealing in affluence. It's dealing with delicacies. And people are getting rich through this city. And I heard another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, my people, that you be not partakers of her sins, and that you receive not of her plagues. What is that verse saying without saying it? And by saying it, honestly, I guess, we've got a direct mandate here, right? Yeah. First of all, come out of her, my what? People. My people, which means that to come out, you've got to be in, which means that my people are in her, right? There are people of God who live in this city at the time that this verse is being spoken. Because God is saying, come out of her, my people, which means my people are in there, right? Number one, come out of her, my people, that you be not partakers of her sins, and that you receive not of her plagues. So this is a warning to followers of God to leave the city, right? Now, whether this will be announced through people who the Lord uses prophetically within the church, whether it's going to be that the Lord supernaturally does it, whether, you know how times I've noticed this, interestingly, like, who's the dude that's got the church out that did read my mind here? Not Michael Todd, the other dude, out in North Carolina. Stephen Furtick, thank you. So there have been times like I've seen Stephen Furtick and Craig Groeschel and local pastors and like people that I know in Kansas all preaching on the same thing at the same time. And you know that they're not getting notes from the Catholic Digest, right? It's not like you've got a book and you just go through it according to your movement, right? Like, I'm not Catholic, but it seems like, and if there are Catholic people that are on here, you can tell me, like, email me or something like that and tell me if I've got this right. But from people that I've known that have gone to the Catholic Church, it seems that it's consistent. It starts and you follow a kind of a guideline through the course of the year. And I know that there are denominations that, what's that?
Lutherans do it.
Lutherans do that too? And so educate me. This isn't a slam on anybody. I'm just making a point. I'm trying to understand, right? It's when you're in a movement that gives you guidelines to follow, and no matter where you go in that movement, you're reading the same scripture, you're singing the same hymn, whatever. That's understandable if you're distributing that material so that all of your movement's churches, congregations are purposely in tune, right? But when you see it happen between disparate churches and you see them teaching on the same thing, you know that the Lord's saying something, right? There's not really any other way that that's going to happen other than that the Holy Spirit is prompting people to talk about something, right? Maybe come out of her, my people, is going to end up being a common topic for a period of time where people are going to say, I don't know why, but I feel like I'm supposed to move. I just think we're supposed to move. And it starts this conversation, and churches begin talking about it internally, and there's just a mass exodus of people that end up leaving. We'll pick on New York just for the sake of having a city to talk about. They just leave New York, right? Because God told me to move. Why did you move? I don't know. God told me to move, right? Could be. So we don't exactly know how this scripture in verse 4 of chapter 18 is going to come about, but we do know that it will come about. Come out of her, another voice from heaven saying, come out of her, my people, that you be not partakers of her sins, and that you receive not of her plagues, for her sins have reached unto heaven, and God has remembered her iniquities. Remember her even as she rewarded you, and double to her, double according to her works. In other words, in whatever she's given to you, reward her twice over. The cup that she's filled, fill for her double. She's given you a cup of wrath to drink, God, give her twice as much to drink. Yes?
Do you think this is New York?
At this point in my life, I think it's either New York or D.C. or that geographic area. Yeah. I'll tell you why here in a minute. How much? There's only 2 cities, by the way, that I've been able to find, and when we get to the end of this, towards the end of this chapter, I'll tell you the 2 cities. But reward her, verse 6. Reward her even as she rewarded you. Double to her, double according to her works. The cup that she's filled, fill double. Verse 7. How much she glorified herself and lived deliciously. So much torment and sorrow give her. So in other words, inasmuch as she's lived affluently, let her now be tortured by the same amount. For she says in her heart, I sit as a queen. Remember she was wearing purple? Right?
Yes.
She says in her heart, I sit as a queen. I am no widow, and I will not see sorrow. Therefore shall her plagues come in one day, death and mourning and famine, and she shall be utterly burned with fire, for strong is the Lord God who judges her. In one day. Her destruction will come in one day. To destroy a great city in one day, you've got to have a pretty decent capability, a pretty good arsenal to destroy a city. So we're going to pick on New York just for the sake of this conversation. If you think about New York, Manhattan, right? Think about the cities right there that make New York City. That's a lot. That's a lot of buildings. That's a lot of square footage. That's a lot of ground space. Destroyed in one day. Therefore, verse 8, let her plagues come in one day, death and mourning and famine, and she shall be utterly burned with fire, for strong is the Lord that judges her. And the kings of the earth who have committed fornication and lived deliciously with her shall bewail her and lament for her when they see the smoke of her burning. So here we go. Now we're starting to get some more color. Kings of the earth interact with this city, and they will see the smoke of her burning. Again, no time prior to 1953 could this have ever happened. Right? Kings of the earth. You'll be anywhere in the world. If you're a king somewhere on the planet, you will see the smoke of her burning. standing afar off for fear of her torment, saying, Alas, alas, that great city Babylon, the mighty city, for in 1 hour is thy judgment come. Oh, now we have even more definition. In 1 hour has your judgment come. 1 hour to destroy a major city. Standing afar off for fear of her torment. Why would you stand afar off? Why wouldn't you rush in to try to save it? When Twin Towers were hit, what happened? People didn't just stand around back in the back and go, oh, that was cool. Guys, see that big building fall? Let's go get lunch. No, what did they do? They ran to try to figure out how to help people. People, first responders from all over the nation, flew there, drove there immediately to try and help solve the issue of the destruction of the Twin Towers. Why would people stand afar off? Doesn't even say they stood close. It says they stood far away for fear of her torment.
I don't want to be tormented.
Whatever's happening, they know if I get close, if I come within a certain range, I will be in danger. If I come within a certain range, I will be in danger. They stood afar off. They could not get close. They had to stay far, right? For fear of her torment. Saying, Alas, alas, that great city Babylon, the mighty city, for in 1 hour judgment has come. And the merchants of the earth will weep and mourn. Now the merchants, that word for merchants, that word does not mean storekeeper. It's not like the little guy down on Main Street that has 1,200 square foot and sells belts. It's the merchants of the earth. These are global traders. That Greek word there is global. It's a global trader. It's a merchant that sells for countries. They buy goods for countries and large cities and massive populations. The high volume traders of the earth will weep and mourn over her, for no one buys their merchandise anymore. So now we have even more information about this. So in this city that's destroyed in an hour, that's sitting on the beast, that's known as the Whore of Babylon, high volume traders from one part of the earth, because it says the merchants of the earth. So somebody from Australia, somebody from China, somebody from Bangladesh, somebody from Paris, somebody from New York, somebody from Seattle, somebody from Taiwan are selling all their massive items in this city. And other people are buying their goods in this city. So this is a city of global trade. It's not a city of necessarily global production, but a city of global trade. It's a hub of trade for the world. The merchandise of gold, silver, precious stones, verse 12, and of pearls, fine linen, purple, silk, scarlet, thyme, wood, and all manners of vessels of ivory, and manner of vessels of most precious wood, and of brass, and iron, and marble, cinnamon, and odors, and ointments, and frankincense, and wine, and oil, and fine flour, and wheat, and beasts, and sheep, and horses, and chariots, and slaves, and the souls of men, sex trading. They're trading in the souls of men, souls of humans. And the fruits, verse 14, and the fruits that your soul lusted after are departed from you, and all the things which were dainty and good departed from you, and you will seek, and you shall not find them any more at all. The merchants, verse 15, the merchants of all these things that were made rich by her shall stand afar off for fear of torment, weeping and wailing, and saying, Alas, alas, the great city that was clothed in fine linen and purple and scarlet. In other words, that was clothed in fine linen. People that were there, that lived there, were well off. They were recognized. Purple, they were dignitaries. Scarlet, they were affluent. Decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, for in 1 hour so great riches has come to nothing. Now catch this, here's a little bit more. And every shipmaster And all the company of ships and all the company in ships and sailors and as many as trade by sea stood afar off. So now we've added to the understanding that this is not only a global city, but we have ports in this global city. And that is a receiving area for ships of goods coming into the city. And it says that these that come by the sea also stand afar off. So you've got ships coming this way in the ocean to go deliver their goods, and they stop 50 kilometers offshore. And they see the burning of the city, and they wail because they have no place to bring their goods. They have no place to dock, no place to unload. That whole ship of cargo is now officially wasted. You've got people coming by land that stand afar off, that weep and wail because there's nothing that they can do. They're fearful for their lives. They can't get close. Verse 17 again, for in 1 hour so great riches has come to nothing, and every shipmaster and all the company in ships and sailors and as many as trade by the sea stood off and cried when they saw the smoke of her burning, saying, what city is like this great city? They cast dust on their heads, and they cried, weeping and wailing, saying, alas, alas, the great city. So think about this. A cargo ship that you see, maybe have seen in the ocean, one cargo ship will hold, are you ready for this? You know the containers, the little shipping containers? They're 40 feet long, 8 feet wide, and 8 feet tall, or 10 feet tall, 8 feet wide, and 40 feet long. One average ship will hold 22,000 of those containers. One average ship will hold 22,000, yes, 22,000 shipping containers. Not 2,200, 22,000 shipping containers. If you go out and Google ships and you look up container ships and read how many they can hold, it's pretty amazing. Quite amazing. And I've told you before, there's a website you can go out and you can see all of the traffic going over the ocean. You can click on the ship and see how many cargoes, how many containers are on that cargo ship and where it's headed, where it came from. I mean, the total gross volume, weight, and the whole 9 yards. It's pretty cool. So they're saying, alas, alas, everything's been made, alas, alas, that great city wherein were made rich all that had ships by the sea by reason of their costliness, in 1 hour is made desolate. Verse 19, we just read verse 20. Rejoice over her, you heaven, and you holy apostles and prophets of God, for God has avenged you on her. Your holy apostles and prophets, for God has avenged you on her. And a mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone and cast it into the sea, saying, thus with violence shall that great city Babylon be thrown down and be found no more. So what kind of violence does a millstone create? Well, take a guess. Anybody? Maybe. Could. Let me finish reading the rest of this and we'll come back to it. The voice of harpers and musicians and of pipers and trumpeters will not be heard any more at all in you. No craftsman whatsoever will be found in you, any more in you. And the sound of the millstone will not be heard any more of you at all. Verse 23, the light of a candle will not shine in you anymore. The voice of the bridegroom and of the bride will not be heard in you anymore. The merchants that were great men of the earth, for by your sorceries were all nations deceived. Let me read that verse again. The light of a candle will not shine any more in you. The voice of the bridegroom and of the bride will not be heard any more in you. For your merchants were the great men of the earth. Your merchants were the great men of the earth. Great men of the earth. Who would be great men of the earth right now? Elon Musk would be considered a great man. Yeah, he's pretty great, right? Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, certainly names that would come to the top of my list as far as people that would be great in the realm of finance or business, right? The great men of the earth, for thy merchants were the great men of the earth, for by thy sorceries were all nations deceived. And in her was found the blood of prophets and of saints and of all that were slain upon the earth. So the city ultimately is responsible for the blood of all who were slain upon the earth. The interesting thing about the word sorceries is that it's the word pharmakia in the Greek. So it's by your pharmakia were all nations deceived.
Is that the Pharmacia headquarters?
Yeah. By your pharmakia. I think it's interesting. So think about, I'm going to go back. We're going to come back to, we're done with that chapter. We're going to focus for the last few moments on the millstone and on the pharmakia. So the reason why the word pharmakia is witchcraft is because drugs are used in witchcraft. I mean, that is part of how witchcraft works. The thing that's interesting about this is that I look at it and I think it could be by your pharmaceuticals as well. When you think about how we as a nation have become heavily driven by drug sales. I mean, look at all types of drugs. Take your pick. We just had a vote in Oklahoma that gratefully did not pass to make marijuana, a drug of choice, right? You can grab a weed and drink a cigarette, and you know what I'm saying? I mean, I just can't. I mean, I look at it, I think, how in the world can we even? When Colorado did it, one of the most amazing things I ever heard were people from the government of Colorado saying, we didn't expect students to take their parents' drugs. I'm like, what freaking idiots. Yeah, sure, I'm going to bring weed home, and I'm going to leave it in my purse, and my son's not going to do anything with it, because he's, of course, not at all interested in finding out what it's like to toke on a joint, right? Anyways, idiots. So, when you have to teach people common sense, it's sad, especially when they're in public office. So when we look at this, though, we have a fetish in this nation for drugs. Fentanyl, take your pick. The illegal drugs, you can get drugs anywhere you want them. They're just available anywhere. The very first time I was ever offered drugs, I was in 6th grade. That was me, and I'm old, right? I mean, that had to have been stop and think here. 79. Let's see. 79, something like that, 78, something like that. I can't remember anymore now. Don't laugh at me. Just because you're older than me doesn't mean I'm not old.
I've been out of school 13 years by then.
But my point is, think about this. This is the late 70s, right? I was offered drugs in 6th grade in the late 70s. What's it like today? 50 years later, right? 45 years later, whatever. So, by her pharmakia, she deceived the nations. By her pharmaceuticals, by her drugs, by her witchcraft, she deceived the nations. Okay, so let's end with this. Last thought. The millstone. What type of destruction does a millstone create? So a millstone is round, right? Millstone it's got a hole in the middle, round on the outside, right? What kind of destruction does a millstone create? Oops. Millstone. Hang on. There's your tidal wave. So, catch this right here. So, I would go on record as saying, do you see it? I would go so far as to say that what you're seeing is an atomic blast. When you drop a round object with a hole in the middle on anything, the pressure pushes down and forces up the middle. That's really the point of. That's the reason why I think when he's trying to describe this, and he's saying that he saw an angel throw a millstone in the ocean, right? That verse says, thus with violence, right? Thus with violence shall it be overthrown. Verse 18. He says, a mighty angel, verse 21, took up a stone like a great millstone and cast it into the sea, saying, thus with violence will Babylon be thrown down and be found no more at all. So when we put all the pieces together, we have a millstone being thrown in the ocean. It gets thrown, and when that happens, if you remember that video, it goes out, comes up, just like it is just like an atomic bomb. It's the same basic effect. It creates the crater, forces the plume up into the air, and then it all settles back down again. And it has to be a type of judgment that can destroy a massive city in 1 hour. It has to be the fire of burning. It has to be smoke, and it has to be something where nobody wants to get close. So I think we can pretty safely assume that the city is going to end up getting nuked.
So would the city be compared to the ocean like a sea of people?
No, I think the point is it's just identifying with turbulence. That's what it's saying. It's like the action that they're experiencing, that he was showing John with the millstone. That same level of destructive turbulence is what's going to happen to the city. Yeah, that's a good question though. So yeah, I don't think it's people. I think it's just the motion.
Well, and if it is like New York, isn't New York a man-made island?
I don't know the answer to that.
I want to say Manhattan was created.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
Could it be the Vatican?
Well, the Vatican's not a port city.
Okay.
Right? So when we look at the port city, so to meet the criteria for Babylon, it has to be a port city, has to be a global trading entity. The kings of the earth for global trade have to be able to be wealthy and get wealthy there. It has to be a port city in the sense that you have to be able to drop off goods at the city, right? It has to be a place of global trade for everything. New York is. New York is the UN. New York is NASDAQ. New York is New York Stock Exchange. New York is, what's that?
The trade market.
Trade, yep. The international trade happens through New York, right? It is a city through which all of the kings of the earth have become wealthy. New York is a port city. It does have places to undock, to dock ships and unload them, right? Interestingly, New York was the capital city of the United States, right? Prior to Washington, D.C., New York was our capital. When you look at it, so when you look at all the pieces, and I'll end with this, when you look at all the pieces and you compare the cities of the world, I did research on the cities of the world to see which cities could meet the criteria to be Babylon, and there's only 2 cities that I found currently that meet the criteria. Doesn't mean this can't change, and if the Lord tarries, right, these cities could change. But as of today, the only 2 cities that I could find that meet all of the criteria would be New York and Singapore. Those are the 2 cities that I found. So now somebody watching the video may come back with another city and say why, and I welcome that, right? I mean, if there's another city that seems to meet at some place that I don't know about, bring it on, because I'd love to know. But looking at all of the pieces of Revelation 17 and 18, and looking back in the earlier 13, really probably Revelation 13 through 18, and putting all the pieces together, and then looking at this, I think right now, if I had to be a betting person, I would say it's either New York or Singapore. Yeah. New York and Washington, D.C. are geographically separated, right? I mean, it's not like a suburb, right? So I don't know. It's just a good question. I don't know the answer. Could D.C., I don't know if D.C. has ports or not. I don't know I've never researched to find out if D.C. has places to drop off goods. So, and it may not be either one of them, right? I mean, it could be that I'm totally wrong. I'm just saying that based on what I know right now, those are the only 2 cities that I could find. So we're coming back next week. We'll be in 19 and 20. Revelation 19, we'll see Jesus come back, which is going to be pretty cool. Revelation 20 then takes us into the beginnings of judgment, and actually to the point of, we'll actually reach the end of humanity in Revelation 20. So next week when we get together, we'll talk about Jesus' return. We'll talk about the wedding feast. We'll talk about the wedding feast. If you ever wanted to know what the wedding feast is, we'll talk about that next week. And then we'll talk about the end of humanity as we know it. Yep. So, see you next week.